situated near the tip of Africa, is where we're from, South Africa. It's probably closer to Antarctica than it is the US, the UK, or Europe. Add to that various levels of sanctions in the 60s and 70s, hardcore sanction in the 80s, which lasted 10 years, plus a conservative government. The birth of the alternative culture was more a trickle born out of rebellion a few years after the initial onslaught in the north.
Despite political and social unrests and an economy that's never actually recovered, the advent of the internet brought an accessibility to the scene, which helped it grow. So we often get asked what the scene is like, and we've gone to the trenches to get the lowdown.
And on screen we've got Patrick Davidson, guitarist for Mind Assault, founder and curator for Metal for Africa. We've got John Morrow, guitarist from Aggro and an independent reviewer. We've got Reegan Buisson, vocalist for Facing the Gallows, and Carlos Sanches, vocalist for Deadline.
And a wild Lou de Pisani appears from The Drift, Knave, and MK Ondergrond.
Well, when we were there, festivals were generally very DIY. I mean, they had, I think the biggest festivals were obviously yours. There was Witch Fest, which was a big one. And then there were a couple in Joburg, like kind of one-day festivals as well. But they were generally very DIY in the sense that it was people within the community that used to kind of run them and, you know, that kind of thing. And no such thing as commercial sponsorships or anything like that. What has it been like now, especially since you've had some international bands and stuff playing things like that? Is it still kind of the same? Is it still like the community just banding together to try and make that work? Or has it gotten bigger than that?
For the most part, it's much the same. But I think when we're talking about festivals, are we talking metal festivals or are we including cross-genre festivals? Because that's an important distinction.
I think we're talking more about festivals within the alternative community.
In that case, the answer to your question is still, for the most part, DIY. I mean, with the Metal for Africa thing, for example, we actually prefer not to rely on any kind of brand sponsorship. And I know Louis has a very different story to tell. But I think Louis speaks a different kind of a language and he swims in a different kind of a pond. You know, he's from a marketing background. I think he knows how these people think, how they think and how to use that without being exploited, perhaps we could say. I think we found that when trying to seek out sponsorship, the best we can get is some like offer for some cheap, nasty promo material of no real value to anybody, yet they want branding rights of the whole festival, and like I'm just not willing to accept that. But if I had a different language to speak, you know, because it comes down to money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And what troubles me about that is I don't like the idea of becoming dependent on that money.
Yeah.
That if the following year that money were not available because there's been a staff change at XYZ brand and they just don't believe in us the way the previous crowd did, like that would devastate us. So my path is quite different, but to me it looks like most of the more metal specific shows tend to rely on the community rather than on the corporates. And I don't know how much the internationals have really changed that, because the festivals where the most prominent internationals are playing are typically more cross-genre affairs. And the ones that have focused purely on metal, a lot of them haven't survived.
Patrick and I have had many, let's say, not heated, but spirited conversations about this the subject, because I think you get two different kinds of promoters. And I mean, I think two kinds of promoters at work. So you like on the top of the one pile, you get people like Sash and Pat who have this kind of human equity behind them. I don't know if that's the right term, but like they're likable people because they, you know, vague. I know you're right there, but you know what I mean. Like people follow you into battle quite willingly. And I think from my side, I think the way that I entered the music scene was for a lot of people. I was a TV show guy, or I was the radio show guy before that, or I was, and so. My dream scenario is always to combine the two. Someone who has like the buy-in from the community, and then someone who can, and I'm not making any slight towards any one organizational skills, but I'm very good at putting together a spreadsheet that tells you what marketing value is worth. So if I tell you that I'm printing 30,000 flyers and I'm flighting 20 campus radio ads a day, and I've got a media partnership with a TV channel, that'll all be that'll be represented as a value on a spreadsheet. And then you put, all the details and stuff to fluff it up. But essentially, Jägermeister isn't run by a bunch of dudes on bikes, going, let's start up a sponsorship. No, they're dudes in suits in Stuttgart somewhere, and they want to see the fucking numbers. They want to go, all right, well, every poster is worth 20 cents of exposure value. Every ad is worth 1,500 Rand worth of exposure value. This is the amount of flightings that's going to happen for each different medium. And you go there, like, here is your return, your ROI, your return in investment. If you live stream this thing, you're going to quadruple your event, So, for the first Viking battle, I'm just going to use that as the caveat, even if that's the correct term. I could massively justify. I could tell you straight, like, there'll be 1,500 people at the show, but by the time the show happens, I can probably tell you that 250,000 people would have exposure to the event, and most of your media exposure value would have happened before the doors even open. Yeah. So by the time you have your final event, I don't have to charge anything at the door, because whatever I can convince you to give me is already going to cover all the costs, and we live stream the event over the entire country because I managed to convince a bunch of people with money. And I didn't get like one sponsor to give me 300K. It's like I got 5 people to give me between 20 and 60K, and it allowed everything to kind of work that way. So there was a big, effort to get an ROI document in place that was very, very clear. So even if you've never heard the genre of music before, you'll go, this is your target market, your under this LSM, blah, blah. This is how many of your target market will see the marketing material for this. Here's a sample of it. So here's a poster, here's the flyer, here's a TV ad, here's a radio spot, here's all of it. Here's your little press kit, so to speak. And this is how, and that's what's gonna, that's going to be your budget for the show, and then everything you make after that is going to go to the bands. But again, to Pat's point, the second Viking battle was easier and harder at once as well, because it's like, okay, so the people who stuck around, I just pitch up at the office like, cool, same deals last year, yeah, cool, easy peasy. But then half the sponsors would drop off because of their own different mandates. Yeah. So again, if you don't want to risk changing the scope of your event, then yeah, I think that find where your barometer is and then really nail that.